In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience shooting portraits with the a6500 from Sony and the a6400, which I'm shooting with right now. I'm going to show you some recent examples of shots that I've done with both of these amazing cameras and just tell you a little bit about my experience using the cameras, some things that I think could be improved a little bit, and what the cameras do really, really well. Let's roll the intro. Greetings, Aqua fam, it has been Aqua. So yeah, I've been shooting a lot of portraits with the a6500. I think it's good to try out new techniques and try out new gear to keep yourself inspired. You know, like if you have the same gear for a million years, sometimes for me at least, it just feels a little stale. There's something fun about getting new gear and how it allows you to put a new spin on your technique and on your process. Here in Austin, Texas, there is an organization called the Asian American Resource Center, and they have a gallery space, and they asked me to do an exhibition of portraits of Asian Americans. So I thought, you know, okay, it's Pride Month. So what if I do a show that's queer Asian Americans, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, non-binary, etc. Normally I shoot with my Panasonic G85, which is a fantastic camera for both video and photos. But you know, I also have the a6500, and now I have the a6400. And I was like, okay, if I'm gonna shoot a bunch of photos that are gonna fill up this kind of big ballroom exhibition space, I want something that can capture things at a higher megapixel count, because the Panasonic G85 is an amazing camera, but it only has a 16 megapixel sensor. So if you print more than, you know, 20 by 24 or even sometimes 16 by 20, it starts to look a little pixelated to me. One thing that's great about the a6500 and the a6400 is they use Sony's APS-C 24 megapixel sensor on both of those bodies. So in other words, I could print bigger, I can get more detail into every little megapixel. This right here is the a6500. This is what I shot most of these portraits with. I love the a6500. It is like, the image quality is some of the best I've ever seen on any camera. And right here, yes, you can see this is the 50mm f1.8 lens OSS version. Awesome lens, awesome camera. One of my favorite things about the a6500 and the a6400 is the weight and the size. Like, these cameras are so small, they almost feel like compact point and shoot cameras, and they're super easy to carry around. I don't really like to carry around a lot of gear, as a lot of you know from watching my channel, and this is really all I used when I was shooting all these portraits. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom, and these are all of the portraits that I did for this exhibition. And conceptually, this project is about visibility for queer Asians, just kind of giving us a face, and also showing just like the diversity that exists within the Asian community. So let's look at some of these portraits, and I can show you the quality that these two cameras, the a6500, a6400, are capable of. Let's start with this one over here. You can just see the level of detail, you know, just around, you know, the eyelashes are all visible. And for all of these photos, I purposefully shot using only natural light, and I shot most of them outdoors just to go with that concept of visibility. So anyway, yeah, when you zoom in, you can see all this detail on the eyelashes and the really beautiful bokeh in the background, just like how nicely it blurs out everything. And these are all shots just taken with the 50mm f1.8 lens. So this one was shot with the OSS version of the lens, ISO 100. I shot everything using aperture priority and set the aperture down to 1.8. Oh, this one's actually f2.0. But most of these shots were at f1.8, which is the lowest, widest aperture on the 50mm lens. And when you zoom in, you can really see the level of detail. Like, you can even see me right there taking the photo in the reflection of the eyeball, and just all these really kind of microscopic portions of the face. And I'm just really astounded by the sharpness and the quality of this lens. I mean, this is pretty much one of the cheapest lenses you can get, the 50mm f1.8 OSS for Sony. And it does a fantastic job at details and colors. There's definitely a little bit of fringing going on here. You can see this kind of green right here where the head meets the background, or where it's getting blurred out actually. You can definitely take care of that in post, but I also kind of, I don't know, I'm getting less and less concerned about making every single photo. Again, here's some more fringing. I'm getting less concerned about making every photo just like the perfect technical photo. And for me, I'm trying to create more of like a storyline and a vibe, like a mood, an environment, an emotion from these photos. You know, when it comes to technique, I'm not the most, technical photographer out there. I like to just click and press buttons and turn knobs until the photo looks good. Here's another one where you can zoom in on the eyes and really see a lot of these details. Look at these tiny, portions of the eye over here, and just the beautiful dynamic range that you can see, these kind of pinks right here and the orange, just how these two blend together. The reflections in the eyes, the eyelashes. The quality of this lens with the a6500 and the a6400 is just insane. Maybe I can actually show you a before and after. So before, it looked like this. This is the original. This is before all edits. And then I added a bunch of edits and ended up at this. And it, you can see before and after. Before doesn't look that bad. This is the untouched image. I used auto white balance for all of these shots. Again, aperture priority at f1.8. And the colors actually look pretty natural, but they're kind of muted. And the color mode that I used was the standard color mode, by the way, which I think just looks the most natural out of all of these. Something about the Sony sensor is really good for bringing back details like in the shadows and highlights. So you can see, for example, there's this like black area in the subject's hair right here where at first glance you can't see anything really in there, but once you bring up the shadows and stuff like that, you start to see, some of this action right here. You start to see a little depth going on in the hair, a little more over here. And I'm not so concerned about certain areas. Like I don't need to see every detail in order for the photo to be successful, as long as the photo has some kind of impact. Does the photo look striking? Is there something about the subject's face that tells a story? That's what I'm more concerned about when I'm taking portraits of people. I asked every subject, like, hey, can we meet up somewhere outside? Doesn't really matter where it is because the background's going to be super blurry anyway. But let's meet up outside somewhere at about 7:30, and the magic hour, softness of the lighting will just look really good. And you can even see over here, this is where the sun is actually reflecting off of the subject's face. And I'm really impressed with the dynamic range in the a6500 and the a6400. It's almost like, how much more detail do we really need in photography? This to me is just insane. This one, there's something about the look in their face. I love these little stars that they put on their face, and the detail is so amazing that you can even see where the ink just bled a little bit into the skin, or where it's starting to melt a little bit because of the Texas sun. But yeah, even in bright sunlight, the f1.8 50mm lens, the OSS lens, was able to blur out the background really nicely here and still keep the subject nice and sharp. Really evenly balanced in terms of colors. Here's the before for this one. I actually brought the exposure down a little bit, increased the contrast a little bit, decreased the highlights to bring out some of these kind of white areas in here that were getting blasted out. And I ended up from before to which isn't the most dynamic photograph, to this, which looks a little more 3D. It looks more compelling to me. And I even brought up certain aspects of the color here just a little bit, just to bring up the saturation of the reds over here. I think I may have increased the luminance of the oranges here, just to make these colors pop a little more. This subject was just gorgeous. She did not miss a beat when it came to posing. I mean, I think this was actually the second or even maybe the first photo that I took of them. I don't know, there's something about the look on their face. They knew exactly how to contort their eyes and mouth and everything to look natural and relaxed. And again, you can see just how detailed this lens is. There's a little bit of fringing going on here in the background, a little bit of that green area right there. But I don't know, it doesn't really bother me that much. There's probably a little bit going on right here too. Let's see, you can see that kind of green halo on the outside of the earrings. For me, this is what I focus on, the face, the look in the subject's face. I want people to look at my portraits and think, oh my God, what's the story behind this one? Here's another before and after. So here's the before and here's the after. So increase some contrast, up the shadows a little bit, decrease the highlights to bring some details back in the background. Really satisfied with this one. I love these juicy bokeh balls. Holy crap, look at these bokeh balls, y'all. This one was shot with the sun actually behind the subject, and usually I use that as a technique to act as a backlight, so it kind of highlights around the edges of the subject, like their hair, the edges of their shirt. Again, there's a little more fringing here, but I've already talked about that enough. This picture to me tells a story without even having to know who the subject is or what their vibe is, how they got there, why are there stickers on their face. There's like this side lighting going on here, and the middle of the face is actually kind of shadowy, but I don't know, like, it gives it almost like a sci-fi kind of edge to me. This subject might be some kind of like almost alien or cyborg or something. There's something synthetic about their gaze into the camera. And I love that their lips are a little bit shiny. And I think I even went in there with the brush tool. I upped the highlights, I think, and the whites in the lips to make them look a little shinier. The eyes aren't actually 100% sharp in this photo, and that's one of the biggest concerns and maybe downfalls of doing these kind of up close portraits using the 50mm f1.8 lens, or really if you're doing any photos or videos using a really shallow depth of field like this, like you really have to nail the focus. And this is actually one of the reasons why I ended up getting the OSS version of the lens, just to give me a little more stability. And then it's one of the main reasons I actually got the a6400 too versus the a6500. The a6400 has improved autofocus with eyes, and you know, if I'm shooting portraits, I really want the focus to be on the eyes as the prominent area of focus. Like you can see just how sharp that is. Here's the before shot for this one, and here's the after. I actually brought up all kinds of stuff, highlights down again, contrast up, exposure up a little bit, brought the shadows up, and I believe, yeah, I brought the luminance up to bring up the skin tone a little bit to make that pop a little more, so the subject is not so kind of subdued in the background. And there's something about just basically increasing the overall contrast to me that gives it more of that kind of 3D pop kind of feel. This drag queen, oh my gosh, their drag name is Anita Hug. Yes, Anita Hug. Brilliant. They were the sweetest person ever. And just, I mean, the details, again, the colors are just amazing. Like the gold, even the shimmering of the gold right here versus the shimmering of the silver is showing up, and you can see all these little details and each individual strand in their eyelashes. This subject also had stickers on their face, and you can see individual strands of hair. I mean, just the detail is crazy on these cameras. Here's a little before and after. So before, it looked a little dark to me, and after, and you can just see how much more it pops after I just did some pretty light editing. This one is one of my favorite portraits from this series. This one I believe was actually taken with not the OSS version of the lens. This is the FE, the full frame version of the 50mm lens. The focus on this one is actually somewhere, it almost looks like it's like right behind the eyes, or it's not actually on the eyes. That's one thing you really have to be careful of. You have to really nail the focus when you're shooting portraits, or if you're shooting any subject up close like this and you really want to nail the focus, you got to be really careful. And it's hard to really see in the screen or even the viewfinder when you're doing it what's actually in focus sometimes. And even just the slightest movement, if you move forward a little bit or you move backwards a little bit, your subject may be out of focus at that point. So I usually just keep shooting. I do a bunch of the same kind of photo until I get the one that looks the most sharp and looks the most natural. I think I'm starting to repeat myself a little bit, so I'll just kind of quickly go over the rest of them. Here's the before for this one, and the after. I didn't really do a whole lot in this one in terms of editing. Let's see, the before here and the after. This one was actually shot indoors using the sun kind of as the backlight over here. And again, there's fringing, but not the biggest deal. You can see just how sharp these details are. Individual hairs, I mean, do we really need that much detail? Maybe we do, you know? All of these prints, all of these portraits are gonna be printed at 20 by 24 inches. So that's a pretty big print. So using the 24 megapixel sensor, I think really helped get all of these photos up to that printable range, you know, where I don't have to really worry about a lot of details being lost or everything looking super pixelated. And I feel pretty confident that these photos will come out looking really good as prints using a 24 megapixel sensor like on the a6400 and the a6500. This photo was actually the first photo that I took for this series. This one is actually not 100% in focus. When you zoom out, it looks like it's in focus, right? But when you zoom all the way in, it's not actually, it's a little blurry on the eyes. But I don't know, I don't really mind that it's not 100% in focus, because the look on her face, you know, this to me tells more of a story. And that's, again, that's what I think is more important. Like, this hits me in terms of emotions. I feel something when I look at this photo. So I'm not 100% concerned if this photo is 100% focused. So here's the original. It looks almost bluish, and I shot all these at auto white balance. You know, I warmed it up in post. I think I brightened up her eyes a little bit so they popped a little bit more using the brush tool. This one is actually a self-portrait. Yes, believe it or not, this is yours truly. And this is the only photo of this series that was not taken with the a6400 or the a6500. I actually took this photo, I believe, with the Panasonic G85. Yes, the Panasonic G85 and the 42.5mm f1.7 lens. And immediately I can already tell, like, when you zoom in, it doesn't zoom in as much because that sensor is a 16 megapixel sensor. I'm a little concerned that this photo printed out at 20 by 24 inches is going to look a little pixelated. The image still looks great to me. You know, the dynamic range is pretty good. I decreased a lot of the colors. I actually desaturated and upped the contrast a lot. Let's see the original. So the original looked like this, and that looks really good. Panasonic colors just look fantastic. I don't know. They just look so good to me. You know, the Sony colors are really good too, but it just seems like I have to tweak the white balance a little more in the Sony pictures. But that to me already looks like a pretty good image, but after the edits, it's a lot colder, it's a lot creepier. The kind of vibe of this self-portrait is supposed to be, you know, don't mess with this person. Who knows, like, did they just start crying? You know, are they about to jump you in the alley? I want it to be kind of ominous. So anyway, yeah, these are the 16 photos that I did, mostly, except for this last one, with the Sony a6500. This project actually helped me reignite my love of portraiture, and I'm super happy with the a6500. And here are some of the first shots that I did with the a6400. These are some photos that I took in an arcade, and I was just using the ambient light from the arcade game, so you can see, you know, I had to take a bunch of frames in order to get this kind of red glow on the side of the face here. And these were all like a pretty low light situation. I was using the 50mm f1.8 lens, the OSS version. So here's ISO 3200. It's definitely grainy, but also I brought up the exposure a lot on this photo. So here's the original. It doesn't look bad, but it doesn't look very interesting to me in terms of colors and stuff. When I kind of accentuated this bluish hue, it really made the space come alive to me. This would work really well for like Instagram or something where you were just seeing a smaller version of the file. And also a little bit of graininess, you know, won't hurt anybody. These were some outdoor shots taken with the a6400 and the 50mm f1.8 OSS lens. It definitely, you know, was pretty sharp on the mustache area over here. This is another arcade shot. You can see the original, pretty dark. Here's the edited version, almost a little too bright, but I wanted it to look almost like artificially bright. And I love the look on his face right here. But just because a photo has a little bit of grain in it, it doesn't make it, you know, a completely awful photo to me. Like this photo, for example, the original looked like this, and then the edited version looked like this. I brought up the exposure, the contrast, brought down the highlights, took up the vibrance and saturation to give it that like arcade, almost neon, fluorescent light kind of glow. But to me, this is actually a pretty successful image, but when you zoom in, you're definitely going to see a lot of this graininess. A6400 did a really good job with this image, even though it is kind of grainy. Whatever, not the end of the world. Also this one, just in terms of his face and how it blurred the background really nicely. And it definitely looks sharp. You know, it's probably going to be grainy again. This one was shot at ISO 1250, but you know, the details look pretty sharp considering I was kind of far away from the subject and I just did everything handheld here. And again, when you zoom out, it looks pretty good. It looks sharp and you can't see any of that graininess. So, you know, if you're posting these on Instagram and stuff, nobody's going to notice any of that grain. So let's look at the before and after on this image. Here's the before, pretty dark. That actually looked kind of more accurate in terms of what my eye was actually seeing in the space. So the camera did pretty well at interpreting that. But, you know, I wanted to up the drama a lot, so increased all kinds of exposure and contrast, shadows, whites, etc. I probably increased the saturation a bunch and vibrance as well. This image was taken at ISO 2000, and yeah, there's a bunch of graininess here, but I kind of like it. It almost looks like a film photo or something. It has this really almost nostalgic feel to it. I think this is a really successful image, and the a6400
did pretty well overall. This one, which we saw earlier, this one has an ISO of 100. I don't see almost any graininess in this image, and this looks really nice. It looks really natural. Here's the before on this one. I didn't really have to do a whole lot in post for this one, just brighten up a bunch of exposure, contrast, shadows, whites, etc. But yeah, a6400 also performed super well. On the a6400 though, I did start missing the internal stabilization. That's one of the reasons why I got the 50mm f1.8 OSS, the optical steady shot version of the 50mm nifty 50 lens, but I am super impressed with the quality of these. The low light ones definitely were kind of grainy, but they had that kind of nice nostalgic kind of vibe, so it wasn't the end of the world.
The one thing that does annoy me about Sony though versus Panasonic especially, the menu system on Sony just drives me nuts. It's just not very intuitive, and to get around and, you know, just change simple settings, you kind of have to press a little too many buttons, kind of menu dive a little bit too much for my taste, but that's the biggest downfall for me of the a6500 and a6400. And also, you know, the big downfall for me for the a6500 is it doesn't have a flip screen. If you don't need a flip screen, the a6500 is amazing, as is the a6400. So there you go. There are some portraits that I have been shooting with my Sony a6500 and a6400. If you have any comments or questions about anything about these cameras or my process as a portrait photographer, let me know in the comments. I've really enjoyed using these cameras, and even though the a6500 doesn't have that flip around screen, I still really think this is an amazing camera. But the a6400 has about the same quality for both photo and video, but it has the flippy screen too. And I don't know, the a6400 might actually be the camera that is the winner over the a6500 for me, so I might end up selling the a6500. It does have internal stabilization, which I love. It's not the best stabilization, but hey, I'll take any stabilization over no stabilization. Anyway, let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Subscribe, like this video if you haven't already. Click that notification bell. You know what to do. Add me on social media at B3NAQUA. That's my Instagram, that's my Twitter. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.